Drop a comment below and let me know where you're tuning in from. The autumn sun was hanging low in the sky, casting a warm golden light over everything as I turned onto my street. I glanced over at Lila, sitting beside me in the passenger seat. Her smile and calm attitude helped ease the jittery feeling I'd had all day. Tonight felt like a breath of fresh air, a stolen moment just for the two of us. We pulled into the driveway, and I looked at her with a sly grin. Mark took the kids to his parents this morning. They'll be gone for 2 days. We've got the house all to ourselves, she said. I chuckled softly, leaning in closer. Feels like we've been waiting forever for a night like this. As we got out of the car and walked up to the door, Lila reached for the knob and called out, her voice echoing through the empty house. Kids? Mark? The silence that followed made her smile with satisfaction. She turned to me, her voice almost a whisper. Empty, just like it should be. We stepped inside, and I took in the cozy living room, the faint smell of lavender freshener lingering in the air. I dropped my bag near the door and turned to Lila, wrapping my arm around her waist. This is going to be the best night we've had in a long time. She laughed softly, a mischievous sparkle in her eyes. Let me just check something. You never know with Mark. He forgets things all the time. She grabbed her phone and dialed his number, moving through the house. After a few rings, his voicemail picked up. She shrugged and dropped the phone onto the counter. Probably busy with the kids, she said, her smile widening. It's just us now. Let's enjoy it. I made my way to the kitchen and plopped down on a chair. I gotta hand it to you, Lila. You really pulled this off. This morning, I thought we'd be stuck with just another quick coffee date. Before Lila could reply, something caught my eye, a blanket carelessly thrown over the edge of the sofa. It stuck out against the otherwise tidy space. My brow furrowed. That's strange, I muttered, walking closer to check it out. What's wrong? Lila asked, sitting up straighter. I bent down to touch the blanket. Mark usually folds everything before he leaves. Why would this be? My voice trailed off when the blanket moved. A sharp gasp escaped Lila's lips. I froze. There, sitting up on the sofa, was Mark, his eyes burning with anger. Surprised? He said, his voice cold. Lila's face went pale. She stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth. Mark? What are you doing here? You were supposed to be at your parents'. Mark stood up, his presence heavy, his eyes dark with fury. I had other plans, he said evenly, his gaze moving between Lila and me. Care to explain what you're doing with him? Lila's heart was pounding in her chest, but she forced herself to stand tall, smoothing her dress nervously. Mark, this isn't what it looks like. Ethan and I are just friends. Mark raised an eyebrow, folding his arms across his chest. His voice was dripping with sarcasm. Friends? He repeated. Really? Lila nodded quickly, glancing at me for support. I invited him over for coffee, or tea, just to catch up. That's all. I nodded too, trying to calm the tension. Yeah, that's right. Just stopping by for half an hour or so. Nothing more than that. Mark didn't budge. His eyes locked onto both of us, his gaze filled with fury and something darker. Coffee? Just chatting, he said, his voice rising. Because when you walked in, Lila, I heard you tell him it was just the two of you tonight. No interruptions. You said you'd been waiting forever for this. Lila froze, her mouth opening and closing as she scrambled for a response. She let out a nervous laugh, but it didn't come out right. Oh, that was just a joke, she stammered. Right, Ethan? Just joking around. Ethan nodded vigorously. Exactly. We've worked together for years. We always make jokes like that. Just harmless humor. Mark's expression darkened even more. The room seemed to shrink under the weight of his gaze. Harmless humor, he repeated, his voice like ice. You're both pathetic liars. Lila's pulse was racing. She could feel the room closing in on her. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. Mark's anger was palpable, and it made her knees weak. Mark, please, she said quietly, her voice trembling. Shut your mouth, he snapped, his tone sharp but controlled. Without another word, he crossed the room, opened a cabinet near the mantel, and pulled out a small wooden box. Lila's stomach churned. "What are you doing?" she whispered. Mark ignored her, setting the box on the table. He pulled out a pair of pliers from his back pocket, the metal gleaming in the dim light. Lila gasped, taking a step forward. "Mark, stop. Don't do this." His eyes never left her as he picked up the first wedding ring, hers, and placed it between the jaws of the pliers. His grip tightened, and with a sharp crack, the gold band twisted and bent. Lila gasped again, her hand flying to her mouth in horror. He dropped the mangled ring into the trash can beside the table. "That's our bond," Mark interrupted, his voice icy. "Our vows? Don't make me laugh, Lila. You broke them a long time ago." With that, he picked up the second ring, his own, and did the same. The sound of metal snapping echoed in the room. He tossed it into the trash with the first one. Lila's eyes filled with tears. She couldn't believe what was happening. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Mark's voice was steady, but it cut through her. "Because you already threw it all away. I'm just finishing the job before you figure out what happens next." His eyes drilled into both of us with a cold, calculating stare. "Now, get out of my house. Both of you. Right now." I watched as Mark moved deliberately to the closet by the door. He pulled out a baseball bat, the sound of wood scraping against the door frame echoing in the otherwise silent room. He turned around slowly, gripping the bat tightly, and pointed it toward the door. His voice was firm, unwavering. "Leave now," he said, his eyes never leaving us. "On good terms. Tomorrow, Lila, you'll get the divorce papers. Pray to God you get off easy." The sight of the bat made Ethan freeze, his face paling. He grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the door. "Lila, let's just go," he urged, panic creeping into his voice. "This isn't worth it." But I wasn't done. When Mark mentioned divorce, something in me snapped. It was like a switch flipped from pure rage to cold, simmering defiance. I glared at Mark, my voice low, barely a whisper. "You'll answer for this, Mark. In court. For the threats, for the blackmail, for everything. I won't let this go." Mark didn't flinch. He just waved the bat toward the door. "Out now." Ethan tried again, pulling me toward the door with urgency. "Come on, Lila. Let's just go." I let myself be dragged, but not without one last look at Mark. "You'll regret this," I hissed, and then the door slammed behind us with a force that shook the house. The sound of it was like a final nail in the coffin of our marriage. We didn't speak during the drive. The tension in the car was thick, suffocating. Eventually, we parked at a dimly lit bar, the neon signs casting bright reflections on the windshield. Inside, we ordered drinks, the weight of everything that had happened crashing down on us. "I can't believe him," I fumed, gripping my glass like it could somehow relieve the anger burning inside me. "Who does he think he is? Threatening me like that? He has no right." Ethan rubbed his temples, his drink still untouched. "Maybe we need to take a step back," he said wearily. "Tonight got way out of hand." I slammed my glass down on the table, glaring at him. "You're taking his side now? After everything he did?" "I'm not taking anyone's side," Ethan replied, his voice tired. "I just think we need to be smart about this. Mark's angry, and he's serious about the divorce. If this goes to court, you need to be prepared." A flicker of doubt passed through me, but I pushed it aside. "You really think he'll go through with it?" Ethan nodded, his expression grim. "Yeah, and if he does, you need a plan." I leaned back in my chair, my mind spinning. Divorce wasn't part of my plan, but now the wheels were already in motion. This was just the beginning. Ethan leaned in, his tone shifting to something softer but determined. "Lila, you deserve better than this," he said. "Mark humiliated you tonight. He showed no respect for you, for your relationship, for everything you've done for him." I set my glass down with a sharp clink, my jaw tightening. "You're damn right I deserve better," I snapped. "But he's not getting away with this. I'll make sure of it." Ethan gave a small nod, calm and collected. "If he's serious about this divorce, you need to be ready. Mark's anger will make him reckless. He'll try to cut you off from the house, from the money, from the kids. But you don't have to let that happen. You've done so much for him, and the courts will see that." I raised an eyebrow, my gaze narrowing. What are you saying? Ethan leaned closer, lowering his voice. I'm saying you need to fight back hard. Get a good lawyer. Show the court how much you've invested in this marriage. Mark's financial success? You were part of that. If you play your cards right, you could walk away with the house, the assets, and custody of the kids. I tilted my head, thinking it over. Custody? You really think I could win that? Ethan smiled faintly. Of course. You're the nurturing parent. Mark's anger issues will work against him in court. Tonight proves that. Any judge will see you're the stable one. The spark of determination ignited in me. And you think I should go for it? All of it. The house, the money? Ethan shrugged, his voice soft but confident. Why not? You deserve it. Besides, he added with a softer expression, if you're free from Mark and financially secure, you can finally live the life you deserve. You wouldn't have to rely on anyone. The unspoken message hung in the air between us, and I couldn't ignore it. I looked at him, my lips curling into a small, bitter smile. You mean I wouldn't have to rely on Mark? Ethan hesitated, then nodded. Exactly. I leaned back, a humorless laugh escaping me. You've really thought this through, haven't you? Ethan spread his hands, his tone genuine. I just want you to be happy, Lila. You've given so much to a man who doesn't appreciate you. Now it's time to look out for yourself. I studied him for a long moment before draining my drink in one swift motion. Fine, I said. I'll do it. I'll teach him a lesson he'll never forget. The next morning, Lila's phone buzzed. She picked it up, her tone cold. This is Jack Forrester, Mark's attorney. The voice on the other end said. Mark has instructed me to deliver the divorce papers. Where would you like to meet? Lila's stomach churned, but she kept her voice steady. Let's meet at the cafe on Main Street at 1 o'clock this afternoon. When she arrived, Forrester was already there. He handed her a thick envelope, his expression cold and detached. These are my client's terms, he said. Lila skimmed the papers, her anger rising with every word. Mark wanted the house, most of their assets, and custody of the kids. She slammed the envelope shut, glaring at the lawyer. Tell your client he's delusional if he thinks this will end in his favor, she said before storming out. Back at Ethan's apartment, Lila tossed the papers onto the table, pacing. He wants everything, she muttered, frustration mounting. Ethan leaned against the counter, calm and deliberate. Then fight back. Gather evidence. Everything you've done for him and this marriage. If he wants a battle, give him one. In the days that followed, Lila worked tirelessly, with Ethan by her side, gathering evidence and preparing for what was to come. They found a high-profile divorce attorney, Rachel Carter, a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer with a reputation for fighting hard for her clients. Rachel listened intently as Lila described Mark's behavior, his anger, his need to control, and the threats he'd made. We'll focus on his behavior and present you as the responsible, nurturing parent, Rachel said. Custody of the children will be a cornerstone of our argument. Meanwhile, Ethan stayed in the background, quietly savoring his role in Lila's life. Outwardly, he supported her, but inside, his thoughts often wandered to a future where Lila, victorious and wealthy, would be completely his. He imagined vacations, a luxurious home, and the freedom that Mark's money could bring. But for now, he had to keep Lila focused on the fight. When the courtroom buzzed with tension, Lila sat with Rachel by her side, composed but clearly nervous. Across the room, Mark was calm, his lawyer Jack Forrester exuding confidence. Lila testified about Mark's controlling, aggressive behavior, describing the night he confronted her and Ethan, emphasizing the baseball bat and how she feared for her safety. I've given everything to this marriage, Lila said, her voice shaking. But Mark's aggression and need for control made it impossible to continue. Rachel reinforced Lila's story, highlighting her role as a mother and a contributing partner. My client has supported her husband emotionally, and now he wants to strip her of everything. We won't let that happen. When it was Forrester's turn, he moved with precision, dismantling Lila's case piece by piece. He presented evidence of Lila's infidelity, photos, text messages, and witness statements that left no doubt about her relationship with Ethan. I had no idea what I was walking into when I first heard the accusations. But as I sat there, I started to see how much of Mark's story was starting to make sense. His lawyer, Jack Forrester, spoke confidently, pushing the idea that I was the villain in this mess. He claimed that the narrative of Mark being an angry, controlling husband just didn't hold up when you looked at the facts. Forrester started with my supposed infidelity. He told the court how I'd brought Ethan into our home, claiming this was proof of my lack of respect for my marriage. He painted it like everything that went wrong was on me, like I was the one who ruined everything. Then Forrester moved to the financial side of things. He pointed out how, even though I'd always said I supported the marriage, I had spent thousands on Ethan. I'd bought him gifts, paid for dinners, and even helped cover rent for his apartment. That really hit me hard. I had no idea Mark had all these details. Next, Forrester started talking about Mark. He read glowing testimonials from Mark's colleagues, friends, and neighbors. Everyone said the same thing. Mark was calm, reliable, and a devoted husband and father. Forrester wasn't done, though. He brought up how Mark hadn't frozen our joint accounts, even after everything that had happened. He said Mark had been fair and reasonable, making sure I could still afford legal help, even though I was in the middle of betraying him. The way he framed it made me look like the bad guy, like I had everything to lose. By the time Forrester wrapped up, the courtroom was quiet. He made it clear that Mark wasn't this angry, controlling guy. He painted him as someone who had been wronged, just trying to protect his kids and get what he deserved. I could feel the court leaning toward Mark's side, and with every word, my case seemed to fall apart. As the trial went on, it became obvious I wasn't prepared for this. My lawyer, Rachel Carter, pulled me aside during a break. Her voice was sharp as she asked why I hadn't told her about all the dirt Mark had on me. Apparently, Mark knew everything, even the things I thought I'd kept hidden. "You said he only saw you once in the house, right?" she asked, flipping through her notes. "I could have been ready for this if I'd known more." "I didn't think he knew," I said, my voice shaky. I was losing control of the situation. Rachel wasn't happy with my answer, and her frustration showed. She muttered something about how this was derailing everything, and I could see the stress on her face. But Forrester wasn't done. He turned things up a notch, starting to cast doubt on my relationship with Ethan. He made it sound like Ethan and I were just using each other for money. He pointed out that Ethan didn't have a regular income, that he was completely reliant on me. Forrester hinted that maybe Ethan was just trying to get his hands on my assets, using our relationship to line his pockets. He even raised questions about whether Ethan cared more about money than about me, or my kids. The judge stayed silent, but I could feel the shift. It was like everything I had worked for was slipping away. After weeks of back and forth, the judge finally made a decision. My heart sank as he spoke. The ruling was clear. Mark was getting primary custody of the kids. He would also keep the family home. All the things I thought I could hold on to, all the things that meant anything to me, were slipping through my fingers. The judge did say I could keep my car and a portion of the financial assets, along with a few personal things from the house. But compared to what Mark was getting, it didn't feel like much. Rachel had done what she could, but I knew the outcome was far from what I had hoped for. Mark left the courtroom with a calm, almost smug look on his face. He was exactly how I thought he'd be, satisfied, as if this was all part of the plan. He had one, and the stability of his kids' lives was secure. As for me, I walked out feeling like I had lost everything. Ethan didn't say a word. We just left the courthouse in silence. When we got back to Ethan's place, I couldn't shake the feeling of defeat. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I stared at the floor, trying to make sense of it all. Ethan tried to comfort me, but his words were hollow. "We'll figure something out," he said, but I could tell he wasn't really sure how. But deep down, I knew it was over. Mark had one. He had the kids, the house, the stability, and the life we'd built together. All of it was his now, and there was nothing I could do to change that. After the trial, things settled into a new kind of routine. I moved into Ethan's small apartment for good. My dreams of a better life felt like a distant memory, replaced by the harsh reality of what had happened. The court gave me visitation rights to see my kids, but every weekend felt like a reminder of what I had lost. Mark didn't stop me from seeing them, but he avoided me as much as possible. He made sure the kids were ready, but beyond that, there was no connection between us anymore. It was a weird, distant arrangement, and every visit with the kids left me feeling more and more like an outsider in their world. Ethan, on the other hand, was starting to show signs of trouble. He'd been disappearing more often, and I started noticing unpaid bills piling up. One day, I checked my bank account, and my heart stopped. All the money I had left was gone. That night, I confronted him. "Where's my money?" I demanded. My voice was shaking with rage. Ethan avoided my gaze, mumbling excuses, but finally, he admitted what he had done. "I gambled it all away," he confessed. "I thought I could win it back. I got unlucky." For me, that was the last straw. I realized I had bet everything on a man who couldn't even manage his own life. When Ethan saw that I wasn't going to forgive him, he left. He disappeared without a word, just a hastily written note that said he was sorry. I was left alone. My savings were gone. My trust was shattered. I cried for days, and when I couldn't take it anymore, I threw myself into work. I had to keep up with the bills, and the only time I found any relief was when I saw my kids. They were the last connection I had to the life I once had. One Sunday, I dropped the kids off at Mark's house. I stood at the door for a moment before he opened it. His face was calm, distant, but there was something in his eyes. Maybe pity, maybe resolve. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking. "I know I ruined everything, and I've paid for it every day since." Mark looked at me for a long time, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "I forgive you, Lila," he said, his voice steady. "But we can't go back. Too much has happened. It's better this way. For me, for the kids." I nodded slowly, tears streaming down my face. I had hoped for a second chance, but deep down, I knew I didn't deserve it. There was nothing left to do but live with the consequences, one day at a time.